This next guest, I don't need to read anything. This man has worked with Richard Pryor. To us, he's like a demigod. When we go out to the Comedy Store, you hear about this man. You can't wait to meet him. Can you say more, Mr. Paul Mooney, the man, the legend?
Look, I don't want you to be offended by me, because I know I sound like I'm white. I went to white school, so don't be offended by it.
Paul walked up to the line and crossed the line about 7 times.
He's our vanguard. You know, you can get up there and laugh at some stuff that you would not say.
Paul was who he was. Blunt, hard, raw, real.
I want everything to be black, because I'm tired of everything being white. I want the
comedy was about racism and the level that it goes to.
It comes on at noon.
I met a young comedian at the improvisation. We were the only 2 brothers there, Keenan, Ivory Wayans. Keenan goes, there's a comedian at the Comedy Store that you got to see. His name is Paul Mooney. And when he gets on, he says the most outrageous but true stuff. And he's talking about white folks. He's talking about injustices of Black people. And he's unapologetically Black. And what we didn't know was that Paul Mooney was planting seeds in us to be what would be Hollywood Shuffle. Speak up for yourself. Say what's in your heart. Say what's in your mind. Be true.
We feel that Black actors should not have to accept these stereotype roles, such as crying slaves, tar babies, jungle bunnies. And I say that as long as Black actors play these roles, they'll never play the Rambos until they stop playing the Sambos.
Everything starts at Richard Pryor.
I met him. The first thing I noticed, he was very bright, 2 shades lighter than me.
So he wrote for Richard Pryor. When you watched as a young comedian how he crafted it, it was funny, but it was also really smart. And so when you see Richard Pryor and you know that Paul was behind the scenes writing, yes, Richard was brilliant, but then there were certain lines that you go like, oh, that's on some next level. And then we go like, oh, that came from Paul. Like when Richard did Saturday Night Live and they do the famous sketch with Chevy Chase, the word association, and Richard is playing the janitor, and Paul wrote that scene.
We got one more kind of psychological test we always do here. It's just a word association. Bean.
Pod.
Negro.
Whitey.
Tar baby.
What'd you say?
You know, where Richard put a little sugar in it, Paul put no sugar. Richard go like, you ever notice that white people sometimes, you know, where Paul would be like, these white people, you know, and he come hard.
They were doing stuff like In Living Color in 71. As a matter of fact, the framework for In Living Color was set up by them.
Once upon a time, Homie the Clown went to a fancy white restaurant. As always, Homie gets hassled by the man.
He wrote on a lot of Black sitcoms, Sanford and Son. You know, he was worked with Eddie Murphy. He's worked with, you know, some of the biggest names in comedy.
Why do white people love Wayne Brady so much?
White people love Wayne Brady because he makes Brian Gumble look like Malcolm X.
So for what he was able to do, he should have been bigger. And even when he did what he did, he wasn't paid the way his white counterparts were paid. As a Black entertainer, you have to walk a certain line. You have to behave a certain way. And Paul wasn't that way.
9/11. I'm worried about my white friends. They ain't gonna make it through this. They're not used to this. I've lost 2 or 3 white friends. They've cracked up. They can't handle this. They asked me for my ID at least 5 times, dude. What the hell do they want from me? They can't handle this profiling. I'm opening up the school, how to be in America and survive.
And sometimes it was not the most favorable opinion, but in the back of our minds, we would always say stuff like that. But then he was the one who really said it. And he would just, oh, I said it. And then, oh, I see you're leaving. Oh, good.
As Black people, you know, Paul didn't bother us at all. That's us. He's us. That's our culture. He's our experience. We live through his words. But then, like I said, there are white people who could take it, but most couldn't.
And I mean this from my heart. I'm serious. If you don't like what I say, just defend my right to say it because I'm an American.
If something came into his brain, he just said it. And I think so many comedians admired Paul because he was that free. I just remember so many beautiful nights, me, Keenan, Arsenio, Eddie Murphy, all at the Comedy Store watching Paul. And we're just like kids, like, oh my God, did he say that shit? Oh, get the, oh, yeah.
His shows are healing. Are healing. You go to see him and the angst that you feel from this racist society gets lifted off of you because, man, he makes you laugh at the exact stuff that you deal with 24/7. I loved him, man. He was honest. That's rare.